Hello, I'm Sook-Kyung Lee, and I would like to thank the Hong Kong Gallery Associations and Asia Society for inviting me here, especially Tate, a longtime friend and supporter. And this panel is really quite an interesting way of provoking perhaps some questions about how institutions, artists, and audiences might merge, converge, and diverse. I will talk a little bit about slightly beyond what I do at Tate as senior curator. So just showing 3 examples, because I got given 6 minutes, which is quite succinct. So I would like to talk about one particular example of curating I did at a National Trust mansion. National Trust in England is kind of a charity which looks after historic buildings and old houses and making them more sort of accessible to contemporary audience. And some of the National Trust properties have been looking into engaging new audiences, in particular young people and families. And for doing that, they decided to engage contemporary artists in their sort of properties. And what I did was with this very old 15th century Tudor house called Oxborough Hall in Norfolk, just east of London, and invited Chinese artist based in Shanghai, Liu Jianhua. He makes quite exquisite white porcelain pieces. One particular work called Regular Fragile was the one I sort of decided to show in this very English, very historic interiors of this mansion. Because all these sort of historic houses usually show little bits of their family collections of things they sort of collected through their work in colonial places or gifts they got given by different networks of friends, perhaps throughout the history of their families. And some of them always have this China, the China porcelains from China or somewhere in East Asia or Southeast Asia. And I just thought this very contemporary take on porcelain as a medium by artist Liu Jianhua was an interesting intervention of some sort to really show how these histories have been actually quite connected through difficult debate on colonial histories as well. So the sort of books made of white porcelain were situated in a library and all this great grand salon and all these different places. And perhaps the most interesting element of this project for me was to really see how the people who came to see historic house will engage with a contemporary art given to them. And it was naturally a very wide range of reception, from really disliking this strange contemporary object from different culture to absolutely being very curious and open to this new interpretation of the space. So that was quite an interesting experience personally. The second example I would like to talk about is a pavilion project I did with Doug Aitken, the American artist, and a collaboration between him and the architect based in London, David Ajay, The Source. So Doug Aitken is a filmmaker and sort of kind of a creator who is interested in creation itself. And he's always interested in other people's creation too. And this particular work was a series of films he made with interview footages he made with different types of people, largely based in LA or passing through LA, where Doug Aitken himself is based. So the different types of creators were from all kinds of art, architects, visual artists, photographers, and like actress, like Tilda Swinton there. And the pavilion itself was more of a round structure, which shows all these different interviews in series simultaneously. So you are almost in their sort of discussion itself. You are in the middle of their perhaps brains or this sort of platforms of talking, chatting, one artist to the other, but also you are invited to their personal discussions and sort of very private, sometimes very private sort of conversations about what really drives them to create, hence the title Source. This was a project for Liverpool Biennial, and it was part of Tate Liverpool's curatorial contribution to that biennial, where I worked at the time. And the construction of the pavilion itself was a very open process to the audience. And as you can see from top to the bottom, left to right, the construction didn't really take too long, but it started from very early sort of structures going up, and people just passing through, looking at these things built up, and later being curious and enter. And although Tate Liverpool is a very accessible, free institution where you can walk in, still some people don't really find art galleries very inviting or open to them or relevant to them. So this was more of a kind of experimental sort of process. We tried to have more public space, although adjacent to the gallery itself, create a public kind of space which isn't quite art gallery, but more directly to the kind of places people go by. And the structure itself and the work eventually toured to Sundance Film Festival, where, again, it created entirely different kind of context for the work. The third one, lastly, I would like to talk about the Korean Pavilion I did 2 years ago in Venice for the Venice Biennale. And again, that's a very institutional space, I would say, but having a sort of nation-based pavilions in a very international, very global, and perhaps very fluid contemporary art field, I just found it very fascinating. And obviously funded by Korean government and Ministry of Culture and all those things, sort of had particular expectations about the space itself and also the reception of such a pavilion into the more large international audience. So what I was really thinking about was to show this pavilion as a real sort of outdoor pavilion, which is in essence what it is. So Korean Pavilion is the last pavilion built in the site of Giardini, the garden where it's sort of one of the main venues for the Venice Biennale. And it has very small space in terms of physical space, but also it has a very particular architectural character of sort of simulating a boat or of some sort. So I, working with contemporary artists Kyungwon Moon and Junho Jun, we decided to make a new work to think that as a very good opportunity to try something new and try something which appeals to perhaps the peers who come to Venice Biennale, but also really large audience who just come with curiosity and interest to really share what might be our future, not just from Korean perspective or even Italian perspective, but as a citizen of the earth, and how we might really see the future in this environmental and political uncertainties. So the artist made 7-channel new film installation, which really dealt with sort of more futuristic vision of what might be this slightly dystopian future. But really looking at the pavilion as a sort of a beacon of somehow darkening situations of our environment. And the sort of film very consciously chose not to have any sort of linguistic element. So all based on images and no dialogues or subtitles of that nature. And working as a whole architecture as an entity. And this is just some images. And I think what I would like to really just emphasize is these are very small examples of what I have done as curator, and obviously quite different from my core activities as a curator at Tate. But just wanted to say my particular interest as a curator is to really look at that role of mediation between the artist and audience, and how different contexts create different audiences, and also why we have to, in a way, very differently respond to these roles and context. So I'm very much looking forward to the different perspectives from the panel too. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Dustin Shum. I'm a photographer. And in 2013, I co-found a non-profit, an independent art space called the South Yard, which is in Kwun Tong, an old industrial district in Hong Kong. The reason why it's called the South Yard, because in many hundreds years ago, maybe Song Dynasty, the coast along Kwun Tong was actually the salt yard operated by the government at that time. So me and the other two co-founders are all grew up in Kwun Tong, so we all want to do something as kind of pay back our own district. So that's the origin of the naming of the place. And it was the studio of the other two partners who were the commercial photographers at that time. And they thought that the place is a little bit kind of wasted because they don't shoot anything in studio anymore. So it was there was an idea that to invite me to turn it into something kind of like part galleries and also part venue for activities. So this is kind of a floor plan for our space. It's a small space, kind of like 1,000 square feet. Not small in Hong Kong standard. We have we prepare the 2/3 of the space as the gallery space, and the other 1/3 as our own working area. Also, we share the working area with a group of young designers who also work for our own design stuff for our daily routine works in exchange of working in our space. It's kind of like a concept of common workspace, which is very popular nowadays. And just a couple of snapshots of our own space. Beyond these screen doors, it's kind of Pierre Mondrian style screen doors. We work behind the doors, and we don't have any staff and receptionists within the gallery space. So basically, you can explore the space and enjoy the exhibition without any interruption. And this is a corner of our space, which is kind of like a resting area or reading area, because we have found some deserted lockers to work as the bookshelves. We prepare some books there, and people can enjoy their reading, even maybe spend some time to have a nap there if we don't mind. And yes, in many occasions, many backpackers from foreign countries spend a half day here just for reading and resting. So it's not simply a gallery. It's more like a mixture of an art space and exhibition space. This is our front door. So where should I point mine? Just 1 second. Actually, there's a video, but I'm not sure if I can. Yep. So this is a very typical industrial area in Hong Kong. And since 2000, year of 2000, many creatives moved into this space, as you may know, because many of the factories has already moved to mainland China after like 1990s. And this is in January of 2013. At that time, the rent is still affordable for people like us. And so we still have a roadmap of making an exhibition for making exhibitions for like 2 or 3 years. But however, after 2 years, the rent has skyrocketed in Kwun Tong, and we no longer afford the space. So we need to shut down the space in the year of 2015. And after 2015, we turn our focus on photo book publishing and also photo book sales. And sorry, where should I point my pointer? Oh yes, I'm sorry. This is our very first exhibition, and I'm coming from a background of documentary photographer, so I always emphasize on using photography as a way to apprehend the world. So when I began to choose works, I try to be more. I try to be emphasize on the variety of photographers from different countries, and with their works, which can show their own culture or their own background. So the very first one is about is a group of female Russian photographer, which is not my own curatorial effort. Is created by my friend, an Italian curator called Steve Bisson. And our space is simple. We can only have 2 walls, basically. So works, the number of works would be rather limited, but we still try to achieve a serious environment rather than, I think many of the artists run of independent space, they emphasize on creating platforms for the creators rather than for the visitors. So, but we are more care about the visitors, the audience, and try to let them to have because many of the so-called photography lovers or photography enthusiasts, they have no experience on encountering serious works, rather than having experience on looking works on social platforms or social media platform or just online. So we try to bring out their interest in a physical photography exhibition. So we also have a bookstore, a kind of small bookstore with interesting photo books that's on the table in the center. This is just our second exhibitions by a Chinese photographer called Takashi. His concept is to revisiting the place mentioned in the books of oaths, Xijing in Cantonese. And what he did is, he's a very young photographer, but he's using a very traditional medium, which is called pattern print. And also we have some veteran artists. For example, this is by Japanese American artist Patrick Nakatani, who is this series work was done in the 80s with collages, also with a life-size setting. So at that time, he was living in New Mexico, which is a place full of nuclear weapon test sites, or also uranium ore. So this is a kind of his criticism to the nuclear weapons. Also at the same time, his own background, because he's from Hiroshima, his hometown. So also he was interned during the World War II. His now is like 68 years old. This is a very interesting project by a Taiwanese photographer, Shen Qiaoliang. The stages was actually a kind of like a transformer thing. It is a cargo who can have many mechanical devices, and then they can turn into stage on location. Because in Taiwan, there's very popular performances for all kinds of festivals, also for funerals as well. This is a very unique Taiwan culture. I'm sorry? Okay. So this is by French collectors in Beijing-based French collectors called Thomas Safin. He collects negatives dumped by the residents in Beijing. He's been collecting them for many years, and I think the total number of the negatives are over 1 million. So he, after editing them, it becomes a very rich archive of the lives after the Cultural Revolution in China, and also many surreal and ridiculous vision among them. This is by a Japanese photographers who took portraits in the areas affected by the Tohoku tsunami in 2011. And also a photographer from UK whose topic is about big game hunting in South Africa. And this is an interesting project by two photographers. One is from Hong Kong, one is from US as well, a Chinese American. They both use photography to challenge the authenticity of believability of the medium. So this because the artist Paul Young used family photos manipulated digitally. So we use some very stupid family frames to frame the photos. And this is my own project about the public housing environment in Hong Kong. And this is the first time we make use of screen door as the display of the photos. And we always host artist sharing, also many guide tours in the past. And also because we are a bookstore, we always involved in curating book selections for other parties. For example, Goethe Institute, there is a German photo book awards. We complemented the exhibition with a selection of Hong Kong photo books. Also, in the past, we involved a lot of photo book fairs. This is the one during the Hong Kong Art Basel. And also China, and Japan. So this basically some of my works. Sorry for my broken English. Thank you very much.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank the invitation of the Hong Kong Art Gallery Association and its directors. It's really great to be here. In many ways, I kind of follow on from some of the things that Sook-Kyung was talking about, like we both work in institutions. In my case, we've recently opened a museum. So I think that my reflections are going to be based on what this might mean for the Indonesian context and the types of attitudes that I bring as both a curator and a director to the kind of museological scene in Jakarta, which is really only establishing right now. So prior to being the director of this new museum, I was the head of Asian art at the Queensland Art Gallery, Gallery of Modern Art. And then before that, I used to run a non-profit independent space in Sydney called 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. Not so well funded, artist-centric, working with local councils, doing a lot of public art, commissioning, doing all kinds of really strange things that were, in many ways, a response to what some of the big institutional players were not doing. So now, being in Indonesia, we've opened this museum, and I think it's important to reflect on the current scene and the ways in which a museum might also represent this frontier which this panel discussion talks about. So yesterday, many of you would have heard from one of the very important collectors in Indonesia about the role and the strength of Indonesian collectors. So as a kind of backdrop, Indonesia's got great artists. It's got a really fascinating long history of modern art, and artists play a very strong role in its development. It's got amazing collectors who are very supportive of the scene and supportive of those artists. And it's got some really great underground small organizations which have done a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to thinking about the institutional and the international connections. So organizations like the Jakarta Biennale and also Ruang-Gruppe, which may be familiar to some of you. But what it's lacked is infrastructure. So if you're a young artist, you leave art school, you might have a little bit of commercial success in a commercial gallery. You get collected by you begin to be collected, but then what happens next? How does the Indonesian scene actually support the further critical development of its artists? Well, it's very hard to do so when you don't have museum infrastructure. And so we've built a museum which is purpose-built, and if for those of you who have been to Jakarta, a lot of the historical museums, are based in historical buildings, and being in a tropical climate, the weather, the humidity, the temperature is one of the things which we all battle with, and so this institution is the first of its kind in that sense because of its ability to control and preserve artworks. And why am I telling you this? Well, I want to also talk about the broader educative role that a museum can play, and those types of experiences which we may take for granted in places which has established museum cultures. You know, places for reflection and contemplation, research, and even just the access to great works of art. So this is our opening exhibition, which we're only in our first 2 weeks of operation. So it is taken from the collection of our founder, about 800 works, which takes up a period of about 200 years, tracks the history of Indonesian art, but also some strange and very exciting adjacencies. So here you see our Rauschenberger on the right with the basket next to a very early painting by Heri Dono. So being able to present Indonesian art alongside international art and things that were going on around the same time is quite an exciting thing to do. Education, as I said, is really important. So, there is no place for people who are interested in art to be engaged, to experience art of this quality and this standard. And we know, of course, that through social media that there's a very excited group of young people who are hungry consumers of all kinds of visual material, and we are, and also of art. So that this is something which which we are working on. But the reason why I we're establishing what is effectively a museum. It looks like a museum. It acts like a museum. But we've brought into play a number of things which come from my own kind of attitude as a curator working outside of a bigger institution. And so before we opened in August and September, we wanted to warm the building, or we wanted to introduce some of the ideas about what a museum could do to our new public. And the way that we did this was to not show any art on the walls, but to welcome people into the museum through a series of performance works. So over 2 days, one day in August and one day in September, we released about 2,000 tickets, and we had 12 artists from Indonesia, China, Singapore, Australia come and present work. So presenting performance art is always tricky. It requires a lot of organization, much more organization than what people normally think or expect. And it's also can be challenging for general audiences, which is one of our, in Indonesia, a lot of people have not had that one-on-one engagement with performance outside of small cliques of interested communities. So we presented performance for a number of reasons. One was to illustrate the potential conversations that could happen within a museum. It forecasts my desire not to have passive audiences. In a painting gallery, you can go from one painting to another painting and promenade. But with performance, as an audience member, you have to be there. You either see it or if you come late, you miss it. And that was something which I wanted to introduce to people, was that that you also can't take for granted the types of critical conversations that could happen within a museum. For it to be successful, it required ongoing interaction by its audiences. And it was also a bit of a test for us as well. The expectation, because the August event happened at the same time as an art fair, so that a lot of people came into the museum thinking, "Oh, great, we're going to see the collection that we've all been hearing about of this collector called Haryanto." But we didn't give them that. We gave them something which was really quite surprising, and something which I think that we're very, very proud of. So we've actually created 2 little videos, and maybe we can talk about this kind of later on. This backwards and forwards between the institutional and the independent. Is it going to work? Click. Okay, here we go. So keep in mind, this is the first time that anyone has seen this space as well. So it was also an opportunity for the artists to play around. Social media is a big, important part of the way in which we engage and communicate with people. We presented some works, very important works in the history of Indonesian art. So that was this is Aramayani's Hand Without Care, seminal work for the kind of emergence of Indonesia in the global contemporary, alongside Mela Yasma. Him and Chong, so a work that's not public, something that doesn't happen in the public at all. And also a very young artist called Justin Shoulder from Australia, introducing ideas of queer identities and underground performance. We actually also did a performance in a club later that night. And then the final one, is it going to work? No, that was the wrong one. Sorry. So Yin Su Jen, it was an opportunity for us to think about the local environment, something that is important to have that conversation in Jakarta. FX Hasono and and also Tisna Sanjaya. This is a very important performance artist who is not so well known, but I suppose his works aren't so well collected outside of Indonesia. And then Reza Afasina, an endurance work by Melati Sudromo. And this extraordinary performance by Agung Kurniawan, where he created a choir from people who were there present on the museum floor that day, but also talking about very important historical and political the political situation in Indonesia. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Septime Webre, Artistic Director of Hong Kong Ballet. I've been here in Hong Kong for 4 months now. And before that, I was director of ballet companies in Washington, D.C. and Princeton. And before that, a professional ballet dancer in New York in my 20s. And site-specific work and work outside of the theater setting is not uncommon in the postmodern and contemporary dance worlds, but ballet is intrinsically an establishment art form and is really work outside of theaters in its infancy. My first experience in producing work outside of a theater setting was as a dancer in my 20s, living in Manhattan, but commuting out to Princeton for rehearsals. And our train broke down, the New Jersey Transit train broke down in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And with about 5 other dancers, over a course of an hour, we created the New Brunswick Stomp. It was a kind of thrashy dance to a pop song that we went on to perform in subway stations throughout New York that summer. It just really came about by accident, and it was successful, and we had fun. Just being ballet dancers, breaking outside of the mold. Since then, as a director, I started to think about how ballet is rarefied and strange, and of a different period, and how the ballet form might exist outside of the ballet walls and be integrated into life. For some reasons, some of the goals were multiple goals, which I'll talk about in a second. In DC, DC is a city with many, many arts institutions. The Smithsonian's huge, and a lot of private galleries. It's quite a large, vibrant scene, but a relatively conservative scene. It's an establishment city. So we began with the National Gallery of Art and developed a project surrounding their very vast Degas collection. Knowing that what Degas was making work about was about the process. He fetishized the young ballerina, and he was really looking at the process. So we built a ballet studio in the east wing of the National Gallery, the very sort of iconic I.M. Pei designed National Gallery, and ran rehearsals. Actually, I created a ballet over the course of a week. So in this very exuberant space with a really giant cauldre mobile above, we had essentially an open ballet studio and worked for about 8 hours a day with ballet class, and genuinely just working rehearsals with kind of pretended no one's present, and created. It was quite intriguing. The end was not the performance. The end was just presenting the work, and it drew about maybe 30 or 40,000 people over the course of a week or so. Subsequently, was interested in much more intimate experiences, and worked with a variety of small visual arts galleries. Snow Globe project that was quite interesting, an intriguing small storefront gallery with a glass front. Very few people, small space, but very dense foot traffic next to a very popular Whole Foods in Washington, D.C. And we created kind of an installation, and a visual artist created a snow environment, and our technicians figured out a way to make it snow inside for about an hour. And I created essentially 15 dancers who in rotation would essentially perform in a snow globe. And music was piped in outside. The score was heard on the street, and passersby could see there. It was really popular, and so we had to establish a kind of moving policy. So an audience member could watch for only 3 minutes at a time, and it kind of created a conveyor belt. Eventually, we developed this concept to activate whole areas of the city. There's an area of Washington, D.C., where it was a warehouse district from the 1930s with a union market, a giant food market, which had been essentially wholesalers from the 30s, old buildings that had gone derelict. And about 5 years ago, a developer began to gentrify. So the area is in transition. The market is beautiful, and about 30 food vendors of different sorts. But over here, there's a gelato factory around the corner, and then derelict buildings, and around the corner, a kind of Michelin-starred hipster restaurant, et cetera. And we launched a series of pop-up performances. The first one was with an intriguing contemporary ballet company from Philadelphia called Ballet X. And they'd done a big project using music by Amy Winehouse. So the model was kind of in front of Union Market, a noontime, 5-minute performance right outside. A rainbow unicorn dancer led the crowd then to the gelato factory for a 12:15 performance, a different performance. And then you followed the rainbow unicorn to the kind of rum distillery place. And there was another performance. And for 2 hours, this kind of activated the neighborhood. Small scale, but kind of grew by popularity. So eventually, these happened monthly for crowds of about 3,000 people or so. So it grew significantly. We are launching our first such project here in in Hong Kong next week, actually with Hong Kong Art Galleries Association during the Art Walk. I think most of you will probably be part of that. And we are activating 11 gallery spaces over the course of a 2-hour period. So we commissioned 10 works, short works between 3 and 7 minutes long, that will happen twice each in a different gallery in the sort of gallery district in Central, sort of starting in Central and working your way through Shenwan, et cetera. And audiences can either see it by happenstance in a kind of guerrilla kind of way, or if one wished to see all the works, one could start at Galerie du Monde at 7 o'clock, see a 3-minute performance, and then follow the crowd to the next gallery 5 minutes later, et cetera, through the spaces. And then simultaneously, wanting to show our process, we'll establish a kind of informal ballet studio in front of 10 Chancery Lane. And a crowd of about 15 dancers will actually be doing a ballet bar throughout the course of the evening. So it'll be a kind of a way that over a 2-hour period, the city's been activated by dance. This is a precursor to a very large project that we'll launch, a 2-year project called Ballet in the City, Hong Kong Ballet in the City. Large-scale projects that will infuse Hong Kong with a sense of dance in surprising ways. And about quarterly over the next 2 years, we will develop large site-specific work designed for specific iconic and unusual spaces. We'll start off this November at Tai Kwun, the new about to reopen Old Victoria Police Station in Central, with a kind of 2-hour experience, 50 dancers engaging the whole space. This kind of experience will happen throughout the 2-year period, and we will be collaborating with a variety of visual artists, musical artists, some Hong Kong based and some international. So you will know about it because it'll be in your face. The goals are, as I mentioned, are rather specific. There are 3. One is to have people in Hong Kong see their city in a new light. We Hong Kongers are practical and are busy, and forget that it's a city about vibrant energy and culture. And by having a dancer sort of stumble upon a performance by surprise in a food market, or see dancers giving themselves ballet class in the MTR. One of the things we're doing is a Friday night bar, BARRE, with dancers kind of warming up during the rush hour on a Friday night in the MTR stations, for example. We want to inform, kind of let people in Hong Kong see the city in a creative light. The second is to, through subterfuge, connive to make this a city of ballet goers. So I started this discussion acknowledging that ballet is rarefied, the theater is a temple, inaccessible, even more inaccessible than museums or gallery spaces, and the price of admission is quite high. By putting it out there, people passing us by have become ballet goers. When they are asked the question, have you ever attended the ballet? The answer will now be yes. And we will sort of, through intrigue, immerse ourselves more thoroughly into the cultural fabric of the city. The third is to change how audiences view themselves. What we do as classical artists we provide a mirror to the audience to show them their ideal self. When the audience goes up in the theater and ballet dancers on stage, essentially, regardless of what the ballet is about, whether it's an abstract work by Cunningham or Balanchine or a story about swans and lakes, what the audience is really seeing is their idealized selves. The dancers are younger than they are, more beautiful than they are. They can jump higher. They can turn faster. They are superhumans, but they are the metaphor, the idealized self for the audiences. And so by the dancers essentially being present in the city and providing the sense of surprise, they're also providing the audience a kind of information that the viewer can be as amazing as the dancer is. It's kind of a metaphor for how amazing our society can be, or we can be as people. So that's the essential kind of big picture goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And look forward to partnering with the various gallerists and museum people who are here in town. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Selina. I was a curator, but I'm no longer because I haven't curated any show since 2014. And what I have been doing, in 2014, I was editor-in-chief for White Wall, the Chinese version. When I launched the magazine, the Chinese version, it was originate from New York. And so we started the Chinese version in Beijing. And 2015, late 2015, I moved back to Hong Kong, and then now I'm editor-in-chief of CoBo Social. So today my presentation is more about what we do at CoBo. And so I would mainly highlight two projects that we did in the past months, which is relevant to today's discussion. Before that, I would just like to very briefly say a few words about CoBo, because so I think most people here know us as an online media platform, and we focus on Asia contemporary arts. We have been very active on social media, which is our way of being a media outlet, actually. So the way that we do journalism or we do art publication is quite different from print magazines, or we don't have anything. We don't exist anyway. In fact, so we exist only in the virtual world. Everything is digital. Everything is online. We do a lot of video. We have standard video productions, but we also we do a lot with our iPhone, which is very close to social media. We do Facebook Live, which is very popular because people like it to watch it immediately, and then also the art world people like to be featured in videos, but also on social media. So that's our kind of way of doing reporting and coverage on art events and exhibitions, and also to particularly because we focus on Asia, particularly the emerging art scenes in Southeast and South Asia. So we have contributors we have 90 contributors right now, and they are mainly curators and independent curators and art writers, art critics who have been doing kind of field work in different countries for many years. So they are the experts, and we are learning from them. And so we launched the platform in March 2016. So now we are 1.5 years old. So we start with a series of video talk show with people actually flying in at that time for Art Basel. And that's how we kind of start and being known as for our video production. But then we have a lot of text articles, reviews as well, because we have a big group of contributors. And after that, we start planning for different events. And it was last summer, actually, we start working on two projects, Art in the Bar and Video Art Asia. So these are the two projects that I want to talk about. And I also want to come back maybe later during the discussion why it took us so long. We start thinking about we start working on the ideas last summer. So we actually launched the two projects together at the same time just 2 months ago in mid-September. So it's kind of crucial and interesting as well to come back to this point, why we have this kind of time gap, and also how it functions for us as a non-institution, and how we work a little bit outside of traditional medium would do. So this is the Art in the Bar event. It's only one night, and it happened only in Hong Kong on the 14th September. And so what we do is there's a video. I'm going to... I'm going to show the video at the same time I do my presentation because I only have 6 minutes. How can I, okay. Okay. So for that evening, we worked with 10 bars from, can I lower the volume? Can you hear me? Sorry. We partner with 10 F&B establishments in Hong Kong, from Wan Chai to Central all the way to Kennedy Town. It's also the kind of gallery trial that we're going to do on Tuesday. So you can see that we feature 23 artists from the region. So from Asia, we have Hong Kong, China, Indonesia, Thai artists, Pakistan, Indian, Singaporean artists, and we curate a 3-hour video art program. And the 10 bars which work with us, they have to show during that night our program. So 3 hours, some of them are a little bit for once, some a little bit for twice, depending the closing time of the bar. What I want to say is that it's actually nothing new to put art in the bar or in the cafes. What is interesting or exciting for us is that it's probably the first time that 10 bars will come together and do the same thing. And it's also probably the only occasion that bars are forbidden to play MTV or football match because they have to show arts for that evening. Well, I'll leave it like this for the moment. So what kind of results or observations that we got from the event is that, of course, we draw a lot of crowd from the art world because people find it kind of funny, interesting to have a night out to see art. And also, art people like to go to bars and have drinks. And the other thing is that the reason that we do it in the bar is exactly because we want to bring art to the public instead of trying this endless effort, which is sometimes not very rewarding, of asking people to go to museums and galleries, and they still can't make it a habit. And also, contemporary art is always very intimidating for many people. So we want to create this kind of idea that art can actually be part of your lifestyle. So you go to bar every Thursday, Friday, Saturday evening. So why don't just let art happen to you rather than you have to make the effort and to go to, and effort and time as well, particularly for busy Hong Kong people, to go to galleries and museums. So we start this Art in the Bar event, and the public actually react to that very actively and very encouraging for us. We got a lot of media attention before the event start. Actually, we have a lot coverage, media coverage, also on social media. And the public, when they came that night, they're actually looking for signs, like where to find the bars. Some of the bars are already very popular for art events, but some are not. And some of them actually first time presenting art events, and they, at the very beginning, they were not aware that they have actually to turn down the music, and they have to play the video with sound. And some of the video, it's either silent for 2-3 minutes, or some of them have a lot of dialogue. So it was only a week before the event started, they actually found out this kind of a little bit of technical problem for them, but then they have to accept it because we want to show the artwork in entirety. So it's either you withdraw or you continue, and you have to show the video with the sound and no music, no dance for that evening. We are very glad that they all support us, and we have a very successful event. And we have people, volunteers who put our Art in the Bar label on their arm. And because you have to travel between the 10 bars, so we also run into people on the way. They were looking for bars, and they saw us with our armband, and they were asking, so where are the bars? So for us, it's kind of giving us an idea that actually Hong Kong public really need this kind of event, and also in the way that art it's it's not that difficult for them anymore. I have to say that in terms of curating the video program, we do pay attention to not to choose too conceptual work, and not to some of them have dialogue, but not too kind of text-driven video. Otherwise, it would require a lot of attention from the audience, and it would you will lose their attention within 30 seconds. So this is also one way how we come up with a 3-hour program that is interesting and kind of short enough. 3 hours is not too short, but short enough to hold the attention of the public. And actually, some people went to 8 bars. It's the same program in all the bars, but they want to see the work in different environments because we use the facilities from the bars. So they have different setup, they have different size projectors, and of course the mood and the decor of the bars are different. And they kind of, I mean, from the video you have seen, it's quite different from each bar. And also we have performances. We have 3 performances happening in 6 bars, and that is also a very kind of a very good way to listen the atmosphere and people to engage the public as well. Sorry, how to? And the reason that we did this event is that actually we are launching a research platform called Video Art Asia. It's a digital archive of video work produced in the region from the 1980s, from the 80s to the present day. And the reason that we are doing this is that because we are digital, we are online, and we want to do something which is kind of in the same direction that we are doing, but then it's also a kind of personal experience that if you want to do research on video art, it's impossible to understand the work if you just have a still image that you can find from internet. Or, I mean, just by looking at one still image, you would not understand the video work. And of course, there's this copyright problems and this and that, but many artists now feel okay to put their work online. You would find a lot of work on Vimeo, on YouTube, but how to identify that this is a video artist and this is a random YouTube user, or if you want to go deeper and find more, like where is the place that you can actually go after, like one video after one video or one artist after another. So we set up this database, and we encourage artists and galleries to provide either the whole length video with a watermark for preview only, or just a trailer, or just a few minutes, a few seconds, even like up to 30 seconds. Basically, it's to give people sense of what the video work is, and we have all the information on the artist and the video work. So it's a research platform for curators, researchers, collectors, public. Anyone can just use it. It's free, it's open, accessible to everyone. And so we want to launch this website, this database, but it's a research platform by nature, so it's boring. But then we don't want to make it too boring and to discourage people from understanding video work and approach the database. And that's why we put the video work featured in the database happening at the bar. So it's a way of making things happening in a possible way and make people enjoy watching video work. And also for us, it's a way to enjoy what we are doing. And so I'm just, I'm just going to briefly to talk about what we are going to do next year. So we continue our editorial work, and we will continue also building up the database for the video work. And we are planning also to make the Art in the Bar recurrent events. Probably we are going to do it again next year in September is a good timing because after summer, everyone come back to the city and they want arts and culture. So it's a good timing. We're going to do it again in Hong Kong. And we're also looking for sponsorship to travel the Art in the Bar event to other Asian cities because to promote the database, we also need like things happening in other Asian cities, and so this is what we are going to like work hard to find money to do that. And then we are also going to start a new project because CoBo by nature is what like at the very beginning of the panel, someone from Gallery Association introduced CoBo as the first Asia-based collectors community. So next year we are going to launch the collectors community, and we are going to start different programs for collectors. But one thing that I want to highlight today, which I think would be interesting as well, is that instead of doing another dinner and partying club, we are going to ask the collectors to start kind of a funding body. So what we are trying to do is we know that in Asia, particularly in the new economies, is that the government are not doing enough to help the art ecology or the art development in the countries, and it's very often the collectors who are doing the job of the government, and so it's kind of from our observation, it's kind of difficult for the artists or for non-profit organizations to approach collectors individually for funding or for subsidize, and they don't have government money coming in. So what we're trying to do is to, from our collectors community, we will start a funding policy, and we want to have could be our writers, could be any like experts on site who understand really well the ecology of different cities, and we would identify projects that would have a long-term impact on the local art development. And we're not going to finance individual solo shows or catalog publications, but events or projects that would have a long-term effect. And let's say, hopefully, everything goes well. In 5 to 10 years, we will see a big change in the whole Asia art scene. So I think that these 3 projects, it's the way that we're working. It's very different from a traditional publication or like what you would expect from a publication. So we got a lot of questions from people why we are doing this, or like how we identify ourselves and this and that. I think we can discuss on this a bit later. So thank you.
I think in the interest of time, thank you for listening to all of these wonderful presentations that runs the real, I think, gamut between working maybe with the non-institutional mindset within institutions, all the way to the different platforms like digital media that are really changing the game in all respects. So, but in the interest of time, and because we have a performance soon, I don't know if you want to join us quickly for just, what I'm gonna do is just ask 1 or 2 questions and then have the panelists who'd like to answer, because I think it's sort of a question that affects some or all of the panelists here. So my first question was, I think in some ways directed to Sook-Kyung and Aaron because of your work within, I guess, current work within institutions, but acknowledging that is sort of coming or having, like, as I said, a mindset of maybe an alternative mindset or coming from that kind of background. How have you found that your, I guess, your work has changed? Do you feel like you're able to sort of bring that into the institution, like really make some changes, or has there been an experience where you've seen a different kind of, maybe something new or a different kind of engagement that you hadn't witnessed before?
I think contemporary art works in many different ways, and it's in a way a kind of ecological system. You need all kinds of elements in this very healthy biology. And Tate is one of those things which works as a very big platform. It's the most visited contemporary art museum in the world. And that's where I find very interesting to make what we do more to amplify what's actually happening in art. We're not really doing it for art's sake, for instance. We're always thinking about artists who produce these things, and for whatever reason, motivations, inspirations they come from, they have this language which is visual art or performative, or whatever the new language they might have. And this contemporary practice is happening very globally. It just doesn't happen in London, New York, or Paris, all these metropolises, but in many different corners of the world. And what Tate really tries to do, and as one of the curators there, what I personally also try to do, is to make these the true reflection of what's actually happening in artist practice, and really making that practices into the kind of platform which has so many audiences globally.
I think from my point of view, working outside of the institution has really enhanced what I do and the approach that we take. I think it's got to do with working directly with artists, having that very nuanced understanding of their needs and their expectations is something that you learn when you work directly with them when you don't have money. I think also, I suppose following on what Sook-Kyung is saying is when you look at the emergence of contemporary art in Asia, so much of the work has been done by independent spaces, by independent curators, outside of the institution. So when you look at the peer group, or you look at those curators who are involved in them, they've all had lives, or some of them don't have lives within institutions, but they're very influential within that broader framing and contextualization all around the world, especially as these corners of the world become of greater interest to those more established centers.
Maybe this is as an extension of that for you, Dustin. I think I spoke with you earlier. I think in some ways we're cut from the same cloth in a little bit. But just to come off of what Aaron just said, I think a lot of what people who, I guess, see themselves in a certain kind of way in terms of being alternative or whatnot is because they do want to sort of shift the dial. So hence my question of whether or not as people who work within institutions, if it actually has resonated. My question, I guess, to Dustin then was why was it just the rent? I mean, when you said you shut down your space, do you have plans for a different kind of situation beyond the publication? I think, I guess artists and we're always looking for the next platform, right, to keep going, to make a difference, to reach people and what have you. So that was my question for you, Dustin, and then I'll extend it to, and I'll just wrap it into, I guess, another last question I had. I mean, we have even the things that I spoke about, performing in public spaces, the artist publication, storefront. I mean, these they have been done before. Can they be done differently here, I guess, and how are you approaching that within maybe your own practice? Because maybe Hong Kong is a different situation for you. I don't know. I'm curious from each of your perspectives.
I think, especially for photography, the ecosystem is not very healthy in Hong Kong because we don't have any photography degree in public university in Hong Kong. We just have degrees provided by private art schools. So I think I always want to emphasize the importance of the whole ecosystem is education, also the institution, commercial or non-profit. I think in Hong Kong, we don't have enough of, for example, non-profit or independent groups or artist space for the artists, not just to show their own works, but at the same time, there's I'm myself as also gallery goers or museum goers, but we have difficulty to find works in Hong Kong, especially in photography, because it's kind of a fringe medium among the art circle. On the other hand, the price of building and space in Hong Kong, for example, like my own space, is nowadays very expensive because it's very difficult to sustain the operation. For example, we don't try very proactively on the sales of the works because we have zero knowledge in the market. So we can't rely the sales of the work to sustain the operation. Then the other way is seeking funding from government, but we need to bulk up ourselves a lot. For example, we need to become we need a board of directors as well as we need a lot of staffs because many of the results we need tangible results in the end. We need to serve, for example, number of people can go to see our exhibition, or we need to run some educational courses for a certain amount of people.
But that's still within the strict, I guess is what I'm saying, is that it's still within the strict, not a strict, but the definition of the history of nonprofits and operating within that. I guess my larger question is, for speaking about non-institutional practices or advancing platforms, or I guess over the last couple of years, and thinking specifically about Art of Asia and its particular histories and its different histories, let's say from other kinds of histories, can we in fact build new platforms for that? That's kind of an eternal question I have. And with that, maybe I can ask, maybe since you're talking about the digital, that's certainly a new platform, but are there big dreams of how to shift the dial? Like I think I spoke about it, some other people spoke about it. There are larger questions for me as a curator about the environment. It's great to think about putting a show up, but what happens to the things after, like the materials, and are there big ideas that you're thinking of in terms of your curatorial or artistic or creative approaches that are not being done now, I guess is my question. Or that need to be done for anyone on the panel. And then I think we can close the panel to questions.
Maybe you can answer.
I think from my personal point of view is that, of course, there's nothing such as a perfect ecosystem. It's more like what you think need to be done and what you can do and what you enjoy doing, and just do it. And this is the way I think for CoBo what we are doing, and that's why I said it's very why it took us time to come up with a project or to actually realize a project is because the biggest asset of any organization is the human resources. So anyone who can contribute within the organization or within the kind of bigger kind of art family or art world, in whichever way you can contribute and that you would enjoy doing it, and this is more than welcome, and you can just make it happen. And we start questioning too much, what is your role? Are you within the institution or are you outside of the institution? And is it your role to do it? Because when we do this kind of events or when we set up a kind of research database, many people just don't understand that you're a medium, and why would you care about research or database? And we just feel like someone need to do, like, it has to be done, and someone has to do it, and if nobody's doing that, and it just like it fits our direction, because we are digital and we have a little bit of resources to facilitate this thing happening, so we just do it. And then also I think many people in the art world are very, like, art world people are very creative. Artists are the most creative people, and why the money issue is, of course, a big thing. And I have been in Hong Kong. I started my career in Hong Kong. I was away for a decade, but this kind of discussion, like waiting for the government to fund you and waiting for money to coming in, it's a very boring talk. And I think just be more creative and find a way to do it. I just want to add one point, like, to in response to Ingrid's question, is that, for example, how to deepen the thing is also very important. The database that we are setting up, we don't just leave it there, because you leave it there, nobody's going to come back. So we have a very tiny budget. It's really ridiculously, like, small budget, but we invite curators from these remote regions, from Pakistan, from Cambodia, to curate online shows for us. It doesn't cost a lot of money. I mean, it doesn't cost anything, actually. We just pay an honorarium curatorial fee to the curator, and just come up with a little kind of background, like what happened in that particular region and the video art development in that particular scene. And we also commission articles, and that's what we have been doing all the time. Like, as an editorial platform, we commission articles to like mostly independent curators, but we also have people from Centre Pompidou and Tate to write for us, like, from their specific research. So one of them is working on the Japanese performance art in the 50s and 60s, and how it relates to video work, to video arts, and how to present performance by video documentation, because it's very much linked up. And so this is a way that we keep on promoting the database, and keep kind of inviting artists and galleries to join the platform, but also to in our own way to continue the discussion.
I think I like what you said about deepening, because of course, yes, all of these sort of these happen all the time, these kind of performances and whatnot. But maybe what you said and what you're trying to do, Septime, with sort of the dance, and even this program to sort of share it on social media. Maybe it's just there's like new mechanisms in which to reach audiences in a different way, using sometimes ways that continue to work. Institutions continue to work, and there's always going to be new things coming up. And but I think, hopefully, we've heard some engaging ways in which really running the gamut from new media to institutions, curators, to, I think, the extended to the performing arts and smaller nonprofits are, I think, separately doing their own work, but hopefully collaborating and meeting, engaging in new ways together to sort of build a bridge for more art and culture, to be able to share that with all of you and more. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists and for bearing with us. It's a little extended panel a little bit, and I'm wondering quickly if we had maybe one or two questions, and then I think Septime's going to lead us all to the live performance. Do we have any questions from the audience at this time? Well, then, with that, we can have informal discussions, and I'm going to leave it to our panelists, Septime, to lead us all to dance.
I agree. Thank you, guys. I agree with you that artists are creative and think of new solutions. And in fact, and we're improvisers. In fact, we had planned an activation of all these beautiful bridges and the roof upstairs. And the curveball that Mother Nature sent us, which was to start raining about 20 minutes ago, we have changed our plan. So we are now, if you'd like to join us, we're going to start in about 3 minutes. And we'll dance for you for about 12 or 15 minutes. You must stand up, please, and grab your belongings. And follow me down the back staircase. And we'll have a good time.
Thank you, everyone.